how should we all live together? It's a question that has echoed through the ages, sparking revolutions and, yeah, building entire empires. For thousands of years, the greatest minds in history have been wrestling with this exact problem. How do we best govern ourselves? So let's dive into that epic debate. And really, it all boils down to one fundamental conflict. Is a just society built on some shared ideal of goodness, of virtue, or is that just a fantasy, and the real foundation is actually the cold, hard reality of power? This question right here is going to guide our entire journey. Okay, so our journey begins way back in ancient Athens with Plato. Now, this guy was born into an aristocratic family during a time of just constant war and political chaos. And frankly, he was disgusted by all the self-interest and corruption he saw everywhere. He was convinced there had to be a better way. And he looked for it not in politics, but in philosophy. And hey, Plato wasn't just some armchair theorist. He actually tried to put his ideas into practice. He traveled to Syracuse, not once, but 3 times, to advise its tyrant rulers. And each trip was a complete and utter catastrophe. I mean, he was sold into slavery and later put under house arrest. These brutal experiences just cemented his belief that the real world of politics was, well, a lost cause. So, to find a real solution, Plato argued we have to look beyond our messy physical world. This brings us to his famous theory of forms. He believed that for everything we see around us, a tree, a person, an act of courage, there's a perfect, eternal, and unchanging form of that thing in a higher, transcendent reality. The things we see here, they're just imperfect shadows of these perfect forms. His allegory of the cave illustrates this point brilliantly. Plato asks us to imagine people chained up in a cave, only able to see shadows flickering on a wall. To them, these shadows are reality. But if one prisoner is freed, the journey out of that cave is painful. First, they see the actual objects making the shadows. Then, they're dragged into the blinding sunlight of the real world, the world of forms. And finally, they can look at the sun itself, which represents the ultimate form of the good, the source of all truth. It's this journey out of the cave that qualifies someone to rule. So, in Plato's ideal state, society is rigidly divided into 3 classes, each with its own special virtue. You've got the rulers, the philosopher kings who've seen the sun, they possess wisdom. Then there are the auxiliaries, the warriors, defined by their courage. And finally, the artisans, the producers, who have to practice temperance. And here's the kicker. To prevent any corruption, the rulers can't have private property or even their own families. Their only family is the state itself. But Plato's most brilliant student, Aristotle, had a very different idea. He wasn't all that interested in a transcendent world of perfect forms. Nope, he wanted to understand the world right here, right in front of us. He wanted to bring philosophy crashing down to earth. And this is really the fundamental split between them. While Plato saw the perfect form of a tree existing in some other reality, Aristotle argued that the form of the tree is immanent. It exists right inside the actual physical tree you can touch. The ideal pattern is found within reality, not beyond it. This practical approach extends right into his ethics. For Aristotle, virtue isn't some abstract, perfect ideal. It's a mean, a rational balance between 2 extremes. Think about courage, for example. It's the perfect midpoint between the vice of cowardice on one end and the vice of just being a reckless fool on the other. For him, virtue is all about finding that rational sweet spot in everything we do. So, Aristotle, being the practical guy he was, applied this method to politics. He actually studied over 150 Greek city-states' constitutions, and he classified them on 2 simple criteria. Who rules, one, a few, or many, and do they rule for the public good or just for their own selfish interests? This gives us 3 good forms of government: monarchy, aristocracy, and what he called polity, and their corrupted counterparts: tyranny, oligarchy, and what he called democracy. So, for Aristotle, the best, most practical government wasn't Plato's dream of philosopher kings. It was what he called a polity. This is a mixed government, blending bits of oligarchy and democracy, that finds its stability in a large and powerful middle class. He saw that the middle class acts as this crucial buffer between the extremes of the rich and the poor, and that prevents the kind of class conflict that so often just tears states apart. For almost 2,000 years, the entire debate was framed by these 2 giants: Plato's ideal virtue versus Aristotle's practical virtue. But then, a thinker emerged from the chaos of Renaissance Italy who would argue that they were both dangerously naive. What if politics wasn't about virtue at all? And that thinker was Niccolo Machiavelli. He was a diplomat in the treacherous world of Florentine politics, and let me tell you, Machiavelli saw firsthand how states were won and lost. His experiences led him to a conclusion that would absolutely shatter the classical world. Politics and morality are two completely separate things. A bit like Plato, Machiavelli's philosophy was shaped by some pretty intense personal suffering. When his government fell, he was accused of treason, tortured on the rack, and then exiled. It was during this bitter exile that he wrote his infamous guidebook, The Prince. And it wasn't a book about how a ruler should behave in an ideal world, but how they must behave to survive in the real one. This single quote pretty much captures the essence of his thought. For Machiavelli, the only real goal of a ruler is to maintain the state and secure his power. Any action, whether it seems cruel, dishonest, or just plain immoral, is totally permissible if it achieves that end. Success is the only thing that matters. To see this theory in action, just listen to this story Machiavelli himself told. So a ruler needs to control a rebellious territory. He sends in a ruthless minister, a guy named Messer de Orco, who uses brutal force to restore order. This, of course, makes the minister hated. But once the job is done, the ruler has him publicly cut in half and left in the town square. What's the result? The people are grateful the cruelty is over, and they're absolutely terrified of the ruler who ordered it. Power is secured. It's a masterclass in the strategic use of cruelty. Fast forward 2 centuries, and another revolutionary thinker arrives on the scene, Jean-Jacques Rousseau. He basically argued that everyone, Plato, Aristotle, and especially Machiavelli, had missed the point entirely. The problem wasn't finding the right kind of government. The problem was civilization itself. This is the explosive opening line of Rousseau's book, The Social Contract. He believed that in our natural state, we are free and we are good. But society, with its private property, its inequality, its vanity, is what corrupts us and puts us in these chains, making us slaves to the opinions of others and our own artificial desires. Now, this view was absolutely radical. Thinkers like Thomas Hobbes had argued that the state of nature was this horrific war of all against all. Rousseau just completely disagreed. He argued that before society, savage man was a peaceful creature, guided not by reason or greed, but by a natural, innate feeling of pity and compassion for his fellow human beings. So how do we get back to freedom? Well, not by returning to the forest. For Rousseau, the answer is creating a new kind of society, founded on what he called the general will. Now, this isn't just the sum of what everyone wants individually. No, it's the collective will of the entire community, which, by definition, always aims for the common good. And for Rousseau, real freedom is actively participating in and obeying this general will. The crucial point here is that Rousseau completely redefines freedom. The liberal tradition, from guys like John Locke, saw liberty as negative, basically freedom from the state telling you what to do. Rousseau proposes a positive liberty, the freedom to become your best self by being an active part of a community that helps you realize your true potential. In fact, he argued, sometimes people might need to be forced to be free. So, let's recap. We've journeyed from Plato's search for an ideal, transcendent justice to Aristotle's more practical, balanced approach. Then, Machiavelli just blew it all up, declaring that only power matters. And finally, Rousseau turned the tables again, arguing that true freedom lies not in government structures, but in recovering our natural goodness through the collective general will. And that brings us right back to today. When you look at our world, at our political leaders, our social structures, even our own desires, which philosophy really rings most true to you? Do you see Plato's philosophers striving for the good, Aristotle's pragmatists balancing competing interests, Machiavelli's princes playing a ruthless game of power, or Rousseau's society in chains just yearning for a lost freedom? The great debate? Well, it's far from over.